What if I told you I could save 1 million lives every year with just refrigerator magnets and a laser pointer? Our company is DDG, and our flagship product is the rapid assessment of malaria. The mosquito is the deadliest creature on the planet, but how can that be? It's so tiny. Well, it's responsible for putting half the world's population at risk, stifling economic growth, and killing 1 million people every year, all because only 1 out of 8 malaria infections are diagnosed correctly. When you consider that the malaria treatment is 100% effective when diagnosed early for as little as $2, this is a serious problem. All because when someone gets infected, they can either pass it on to other people and become a host for other transmitted diseases, or become more symptomatic and eventually get complications, making it even harder and more expensive to diagnose and treat. Overall, our solution is the rapid assessment of malaria, which is a low-cost device and the only test that can diagnose an asymptomatic infection in that portable footprint. Our technology is based on the magnetic particles created when the parasite comes into the red blood cell, digests the hemoglobin, and turns it into this hemosone crystal. Our technology aligns those magnetic particles in a way that aligns the particles so that they block light in one orientation and block it in the other, giving us a quantitative signal for how large the infection is. We have platform IP on this with an exclusive option license with Argonne National Laboratory that is not only the first patent in this space, but also already fully issued, so there's little risk. In addition, we've put other IP that we've generated through our second generation device based on the embodiments and other configurations we've developed. Overall, it's an entirely new workflow for a diagnostic now. You take a pinprick of blood, put it in the device, and 15 seconds later, you get a result, which is super easy to use and fully accessible to anybody without skill. We know this is disruptive because we've talked to the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation, and the UN, and they've told us that this meets the target product profile for a diagnostic that will eradicate malaria and be able to diagnose those asymptomatic infections. We've already shown that we've reached those milestones because we've done pilot studies with the US Navy and Bosch Healthcare and published those in peer-reviewed clinical chemistry articles. Because those were successful, we've then continued on with more clinical studies this year, fully sponsored by the WHO, a 1,000-person patient study with the University of Lagos in Nigeria, and another 1,000-person patient study with the National Blood Center of Malaysia, in addition to other journal publications on the technology. Now, compared to the other two current tests on the market, rapid diagnostic tests similar to a pregnancy test, and light microscopy, the RAM is best in class in all 7 categories important to the WHO. Most importantly, this low detection limit, 1 parasite per microliter, meaning we can diagnose it in the first 24 hours of infection, and at a low cost, be able to do so that we're able to diagnose all suspected malaria infections underneath the budget for currently for malaria. But the real cost advantage comes from the idea that the current RDTs can't scale up lower than 24 cents per test. And knowing that we're able to get a consumable for 3 cents per test, we can put our price point at 25 cents and outbid them really at any time during the bidding process. Knowing this, we save over $100,000 in the lifetime of the device, and for RFPs of $1 million, we save 250 grand. The competitive advantage is clear, and the ability to merge the low cost of the device and the low limit of detection will be dominant in the space for the next decade. Overall, the private market is a subsector of the $13.8 billion point-of-care market and the $1.5 billion malaria market. It's focused on independent hospital chains that want this razor blade model so they can upsell the cuvette through their distribution channels at that $7.5 price point. The other side is the public market. That's the large nonprofit foundations investing in extremely low detection and a portable device that can diagnose those asymptomatic populations, something that only we can do and fill. Overall, what separates us from the competition today is we've done all this with no current funding up to this point. We've raised $500,000 through non-equity grants and prizes like Mass Challenge and MIT 100K to build prototypes, design and fabricate them, and to put them into the field. We've sold $65,000 worth of devices to different companies all around the globe, interested in evaluating these on an evaluative basis to determine if they want to do a distribution partnership down the road for their individual country of interest. Phase 2 of our scale-up will be the private customers that are focused directly on cost savings against those current techniques they currently use. We've already generated letters of interest for 10 million units, some of those shown up here, for these, and and expect that with more money into this space, we'll actually be able to increase those letters of interest over the next 12 months. Lastly, the public sector will be able to focus on these with other letters of interest focused mostly on reducing the transmission and wasted treatment of false positives. I showed that we made a lot of traction with the current funding, and one of the key examples is for $100,000, we've decreased the footprint of the device to 1 inch by 2 inches, the cost of goods down from 66% to $120, reduced all of the moving parts, or eliminated all the moving parts, created new IP, and gotten higher sensitivity, all with that Optics for Hire project. Overall, we've done a case study with IDEO to maximize and optimize the external design of the device. And then under the hood, we've worked with Optics for Hire to better lay out the sample with electronics on one side and mechanics on the other, and allow for a better scale-up of manufacturing and assembly. Overall, though, malaria is just the first test. We're looking to build this out into a platform device that can diagnose any nonspecific fever walking into the clinic. We want to be able to put in magnetic particles that are functionalized, look for any antibody created by a disease, and then tell you quantitatively what that disease and how large it is. We've already put partnerships together with key organizations around the globe to make that happen. We have R&D partnerships with Argonne National Lab and MIT to provide the functionalization and the optimization of the particles. Our largest commercial partner, Denka, has given us $200,000 development grant to fund those partnerships, and also will be providing specific antibodies and distribution networks in those countries to scale it up. And lastly, Bosch Healthcare and other large commercial partners are acting as a vehicle for us to accept multi-million-dollar grants from the EU Commission and Japanese Commission. Overall, we've shown that we can impact a lot of people with a low amount of money, and that will be no different next year if we win the $1 million prize. We show that through our concrete milestones with Optics for Hire projects, engineering scale-up, and R&D programs, we'll not only get the malaria test to the market next year, but also get a proof of concept for this next disease. One thing I want to show with our financial projections is that this is very conservative. We have an active screening market, which is just the market focused on people that are asymptomatic. Knowing that and taking that into account, even if we convert only half of our letters of interest for next year, we're almost already cash flow positive. In addition, the cash cycle for the industry is very advantageous to sellers like us, because 30% of the price point is paid up front. Meaning by year 2, we're already cash flow positive on our device bundles and a $1.5 million company. In year 3, we're already a $3 million company, which is the typical exit point for companies like Alaire acquiring high technology and diagnostic companies. And overall, remember that this is just for the active screening market. We can still scale up to the entire malaria market, and on top of that, layer in other diseases on that, making us a huge company in the biomedical space. Overall, we've set the management team to really bring technical expertise to the company. We have patent and IP work from Alphonse, myself with my PhD thesis at MIT, manufacturing experience, business development from Medtronic, and we're going through the NSF course program to help us with non-equity grant funding, also at MIT. But really one of the things I want to focus on is this company is perfect for creating jobs in the Buffalo area, because Buffalo is creating a medtech revolution here. So not only have we already set up meetings and gone to tour places for BL2 lab space, we're looking to be the next diagnostic that moves this company forward, just like Persona Diagnostics did with the CE-BLS. In addition, we're looking to use the University of Buffalo resources to help with the UBCAP program on R&D tax credits, and specifically focused on high-skilled, high-earning jobs for graduate students like PhDs in optical engineering, electrical engineering, and infectious diseases. We've already identified through Pavani Ram, the chair of the Global Health Department, the two candidates we'd like to hire for this year to help us with the scale-up of the platform technology. Lastly, we're also interested in using the Buffalo Manufacturing Works to help us with any of the prototyping done for our benchtop, and also for field units to go into lab as prototypes. And overall, also, Life Therapeutics and Technologies is based and headquartered in Buffalo, which is perfect for us because that's where we buy most of our magnetic particles, antibodies, and consumables from. So they'll be able to give us a discount on both the price points and the shipping. So overall, Buffalo, get ready, because DG is coming, and we hope to reach 1 billion people.
Come on, guys.
Thank you.
I think we're going to be joined by some of your colleagues. Come on up, guys. Come on. Come on. It's good. It's good. It's okay. We won't bite. We might punch, but we don't bite. It's okay. We like that you came from Boston. Okay, I know that Andy's going to ask a question because he did a little research already. So I'm going to let him start it off.
Yeah, so first of all,
You can move up. You can move.
you
Come on,
guys
move up. Let's go. You
for-
can get closer. I promise. Other than Gary, they won't bite.
So first of all, I applaud you guys for tackling malaria. It's obviously a big problem. But I question whether going after the asymptomatic market, especially if I remember your maps right, you're going after India and Africa first. Because those markets are markets where malaria is very common. It's if somebody gets malaria 10 times a year, that's not uncommon, and people wait to get a fever before they get tested. So by going after the asymptomatic market, you're going to be testing everybody all the time, and I can't really see how there's a viable business model in that.
And that's a good point. I think the way we attack that problem is that you have to understand that the treatment is so much more expensive than the diagnosis right now. It's up to 5 to 10 times as expensive as a single diagnostic test, and that's for the current price of the diagnostic. So us being even cheaper than that, it really does make sense to put as many diagnostics into the field as possible. And actually, the WHO has mandated that they want a diagnosis for every fever in the field and at least 2 diagnostics for every 1 treatment given. So it really is mandated by the authorities.
But again, that's WHO mandating symptomatic diagnoses, right? So why go after asymptomatic diagnoses?
And so really what we're using here is the most traction we've gotten for initial market entry. Certainly with other incumbent companies in the space, it would be hard to just or get off market share. But by being able to go for the asymptomatic market first, we're able to carve out a little bit of market share and then scale up to the true point of care market for malaria. And so there's no reason why that can't be a faster scale up or a faster transition once we get devices in these companies' hands. But certainly, the overall larger market is the point of care market.
Given your cost, you said you're at 25 cents, right? And then you have to get your installed base, right? How do you plan to go after regions? I'm just going to go with the asymptomatic for a minute. Like if you go to parts of Africa, right, you're going to be going out to the largest population, sub-Saharan for the most part. I'm just carving out regions outside of like South Africa. How do you plan to get the installed base there? And then does your cost support doing something there? That's what I'm trying to under.
The biggest thing we're focused on here is the partnerships we've already created. So I think it would be very hard to do that without people on the ground that are supporting us from either a manufacturing standpoint or a...
So let's say with the partnerships, can you do it based on economics there and the healthcare spend per capita? Like who's going to cover that cost?
Absolutely. So the current cost for malaria diagnostics is supported every year by the Global Fund, World Bank. That's continuing and actually increasing in their annual spend. So there's no issues on both the public and private side. It's mostly the efficiency.
Symptomatic.
Sure.
Okay, so you've had discussions with them maybe or some talks on the asymptomatic side that this can get covered basically?
Absolutely. Yeah, the WHO has mandated that there's specific grant funding for the asymptomatic.
I know they've mandated it, but I mean specific conversations leading to it actually getting covered.
Because then actually countries apply for grants to fund it on an annual basis, and so those grants are specifically for asymptomatic.
Okay.
So help us understand, we're in Nigeria, for example. Where are the patients intervening with this, with your device, right? What's the real sort of point of care in that setting, in Nigeria, India, wherever?
So in the denser populations that have city centers, it is more of a walk-up if they're symptomatic. So they are going to the test or the pharmacy and diagnosing themselves at the counter. It's only in the very rural areas where actually the WHO is giving resources or training professionals to go out in vehicles to mass screen large populations.
So your device will be in those vehicles?
So in the asymptomatic side, it would be in the vehicles going out funded by the WHO. In the more symptomatic side, where they're reporting to the clinic, it's at the station where they would normally go to get diagnosed.
And has your device been tested in the field in those environments?
So we've done it in both situations. So I mentioned the 2 clinical trials, one in the U.S. Navy and one at Bosch Healthcare. The Bosch Healthcare one was in the laboratory setting, and the one in the U.S. Navy was actually going out into the field and testing more of the asymptomatic population. So we did both.
So the Navy one, you're testing not the people from the Navy? You're testing people, people who are
Right,
there?
it was just a naval base.
Okay, just on the Naval Base.
The
So-
naval base was the partner that was.
So it
going out.
hasn't, you have not tested just so I'm understanding, you have not tested it with someone who is going remotely to some of
We
the
have.
rural villages?
We have.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your negative predictive value? Since you're going on the asymptomatic route, I'm just curious what that, because that'll be more important than your positive predictive value, so I'm curious.
So, like the false positive rates and false negative rates are extremely important here. The false positive rate is about 4% for ours. Basically, that's how long it takes for the hemosome to clear the system. The false negative rate is extremely low because we're able to diagnose it at that low infection limit. And so, something that's not actually clear is those other tests actually have a huge false negative rate for asymptomatic because at these very low infection limits, they can't even pick up the particles. And that's something that's going to go not only just for malaria, but for multiple diseases, really anyone that we try and build in the platform.
But so a lot of the false negative rates are due to, so if you look at microscopy, for example, one of the major innovations in that field is basically putting something like an ollie clip in front of the smartphone camera, and then uploading that picture to somebody who can actually do a realistic or a kind of accurate diagnosis, which you can't reliably do in the field. Very cheap, very accurate, very effective, and why isn't that appropriate for this market?
So the WHO has specifically said actually that the more cell phone-based technologies will not work for this active screening because they're really incremental improvements on the two techniques. So you can either automate the detection of the blood smear, or you can try and automate the detection of the line on the rapid diagnostic test. And neither of them are actually solving the actual problem, which is the physics of not being able to see the prototype, or not being able to stain enough parasites, and not being able to have enough of the nanoparticles aggregate in a way that gives you a result. So they're solving one piece of the problem, but actually not solving the real problem, and that's why the WHO and the Gates Foundation is not supporting those types of technology. You won't see those in the field. Mike?
So I've seen a bunch of companies over the years, including some I've invested in, that, a bunch of PhDs, they come in, it's just scientific certitude that it's lower cost, more effective, no problems with the plan, right? Then you just show up at the first board meeting, things aren't going as planned. Second board meeting, none of the assumptions are right? So as you look at the plan, kind of step away from yourself as a founder, what are the vulnerabilities here? What's going to prevent you from reaching the full potential that you communicate so effectively?
I think one of the things we overlooked when we first deployed devices was the training aspect. We figured this would be zero training, you could really use it right away.
But like scientifically, like not like how you deploy it, just with it seems kind of like the baby Jesus test, right? Like lower cost, it seems to be awesome, right? You read it, you're like, whoa, this is like world changing. Like what's gonna go wrong? What could go wrong, do you think?
I mean, certainly if you're looking outside the box, there could be other magnetic biomarkers that are created from diseases or other magnetic signatures that could give potentially false positives. We've done tests, though, on confounders that would potentially give those, like sickle cell, like schistosomiasis. And so we've kind of already prevented ourselves against those types of typical false positive rates that would really, from a label-free test, really take away all the advantages that we're looking for.
And it's kind of topical, right? There are other blood companies that promise all this stuff, which, according to the Wall Street Journal, at least, there seem to be some issues. And so getting ahead of those vulnerabilities and being transparent, it's okay not to have all the answers and to know what's going to trip you up. You just have to stay ahead of it.
Sure, I'm sure you're referring to the Theranos articles, and I think that's something that our partners have helped with. They've understood where we are. They've given us the different resources to be able to continue to test in the laboratory before getting ahead of ourselves in the field, and that's obviously something we're taking into account.
But I think, maybe the question you're asking is, what are the things that could trip you up in the business model? So let's assume all the technology works fine and everything. There's a lot of issues with the business model, I think, that are completely unknown because you haven't done a lot of in-field testing, which is methods of distribution, who are the partners, how are you going to get to the customer, which mostly is in rural areas. And those are the things that I think are unproven.
Sure, and the best way I can respond to that is that we do have an advisory board. On there is like the chief medical officer of FIND, which is the Foundation for Innovative New Diagnostics, and the business model is something that we're flexible. We have such a low cost. We have the ability to be able to, yes, combat some of the issues that pop up as it normally would in operations.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Good job.
Thank you.